Do you know what the realm is? It's the 1,000 blades of Aegon's enemies. A story we agreed to tell each other over and over till we forget that it's a lie.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back for another A Song of Ice and Fire video. As you all know, I have been making videos on every chapter from A Song of Ice and Fire. Now you will know what happens in the books even if you haven't read them yourself. In this chapter, we finally leave Westeros as we make our way across the sea to one of the free cities of Essos. This is when we get our introduction to Daenerys Targaryen. Since I will mostly focus on House Targaryen in this video, I figured this would be a great opportunity for me to announce some of the videos I will be making in the future. Now that we are only about a year and a half away from HBO releasing House of the Dragon, I need to start making videos on some of the things we can expect to see in the successor show to Game of Thrones. George R. R. Martin's newest book, Fire and Blood, has a lot of the information that will be adapted into House of the Dragon. So what I want to do is start making videos on each chapter from Fire and Blood, just like I am with the chapters from A Song of Ice and Fire. Also, I do want to let you know that I have an extra copy of Fire and Blood that I will give away to one of my subscribers. If you would like to enter the giveaway for this book, there will be a link down below. Good luck to everyone that enters. Shall we begin? Now we will go inside the mind of Daenerys Targaryen as we see the story unfold through her eyes. In Dany's very first chapter, it begins almost identical to the way her first scene did in the show. The chapter begins as Dany's brother, Viserys, holds up the gown for her inspection. As you all know, Viserys and Illyrio have scheduled a meeting with Khal Drogo in hopes that he will marry Daenerys Targaryen. Viserys wants to invade Westeros so that he can take back the Iron Throne, as well as the Seven Kingdoms for House Targaryen, but he's not going to be able to do this without an army. He needs Khal Drogo's army, or in his mind, he thinks he only needs about 10,000 Dothraki Screamers to get the job done. So the chapter begins as they are getting ready for this arrangement. Viserys needs Daenerys to look her best. He does not want to lose the opportunity of gaining an army, or so he thinks. The color of her gown will help bring out the violet in her eyes. This is a gift from Illyrio, who also wants things to work out in their favor. Not only does he give her the dress, but he also wants her to wear some gold and jewels of all sorts. They need Dany to look like a princess. She doesn't even remember what that was like, and she thinks maybe she had never known. Now, although Daenerys is only 13 years old, she knows Illyrio will want something in return for doing all this for them. Viserys and Daenerys are broke. They have been on the run for years, and a lot of people have started to turn their backs to them, but not Illyrio. He has let them live in his house, he has let them use his servants, and eat his food, and so on and so forth. He obviously will want repaid in some way. Viserys says, Illyrio isn't stupid. He knows how much he will benefit when and if I ever take back the Iron Throne. You see, Illyrio is a hustler. He sells spices, gemstones, dragonbone, and other less savory things. Basically, he could sell salt to a slug. This has allowed him to make friends all over the free cities and even beyond. But it's also said that Illyrio would not hesitate to sell out one of his own friends. Illyrio sees Viserys and Daenerys as one of his investments. It's also a bit of a gamble, but I suppose most investments are. It may seem like this is a one-sided relationship right now, because Illyrio keeps giving to Viserys and Dany, but Illyrio may be able to cash out if he can get Viserys on the Iron Throne. Daenerys does not trust him. If he can sell out one of his own friends, what would he do if he realizes Viserys or even Daenerys is a bad investment? Dany briefly thinks about this and she wants to say something to Viserys about it, but she knows better than to say something that might go against his dream. Remember, Illyrio is a salesman, so he knows exactly what to say to keep Viserys happy. So, no matter what Dany might be thinking, she doesn't want to make him angry or wake the dragon. By now, Viserys has Dany wrapped around his finger. He has more or less beaten her into submission. He does this by not only physically hurting her, but also breaking her down psychologically. Nothing she does is ever good enough for him, and whenever she does something he doesn't like, he either hurts her with his hands, or he knocks her down by verbally abusing her. Viserys says, "You will not fail me tonight. If you do, it will go hard for you. You do not want to wake the dragon, do you?" He grabs Dany and pinches her until it hurts. As of right now, Daenerys has no real interest in the Iron Throne. She would rather be almost anywhere but here. She thinks about this as she hears the children outside. In this moment, she would gladly leave Illyrio's nice house and give back these nice clothes, so long as she could be free to go run with the children out in the streets. Dany wants to go home, but she doesn't know where that is. Dany begins to think about some of the things that have happened in her life thus far, and this is when we learn a lot of information about her backstory. We find out how and why her and her brother are on the run in Essos. Viserys has told her all the stories before. Daenerys thinks about her brother, Rhaegar, fighting Robert Baratheon in the bloody waters of the Trident and dying for the woman he loved. And here is our first reference of Rhaegar and Lyanna's relationship. Dany thinks about how Rhaegar died for the woman he loved. It doesn't say he died for his wife. Dany thinks about how Viserys would tell her what happened after Rhaegar died. How King's Landing was sacked by Robert Baratheon's dogs, the Lords Lannister and Stark. How Rhaegar's wife, the Princess Elia of Dorne, begged for mercy as her and Rhaegar's heir was ripped away from her arms, then killed right before her eyes. Dany thinks about how the dragon skulls that were decorating the walls of the throne room in the Red Keep were watching as Jaime Lannister opened their father's throat with a golden sword. Now Dany and her brother had no choice but to leave King's Landing, otherwise they would have been killed as well. Viserys was only 8 years old when they had to flee King's Landing, while Daenerys was still in her mother's stomach. Daenerys had been born on Dragonstone 9 moons after they fled the capital. She was born during a violent summer storm that was so strong it destroyed the Targaryen fleet while it lay at anchor. Dany's mother died while birthing her, and for that, her brother Viserys had never forgiven her. This actually sounds very similar to Cersei and Tyrion's relationship. Viserys blames Dany for their mother's death, just as Cersei does Tyrion. Dany has no memory of Dragonstone either. It wasn't long before they would have to run again, after Robert Baratheon sent his brother, Stannis, to Dragonstone to finish off the rest of the Targaryens. However, thankfully for Daenerys, she had a savior in Sir Willem Darry. One night, Sir Willem and 4 of his most trusted men had broken into the nursery and rescued Dany and her brother. They set sail under the cover of darkness for the safety of the Bravosian coast. Now where they go next is where Dany makes some of her most fondest memories. She remembers how, although Sir Willem Darry had the servants scared, he was always very nice to her. He would refer to her as the little princess or my lady. She remembers how his hands were as soft as old leather. This is when Dany thinks they were living in Braavos, in a big house that had a red door. She remembers having her own bedroom, and there was a lemon tree right outside of her window. There are many different theories about where this house may have actually been. Many would argue that Dany could not have been in Braavos because lemons do not grow there. There are even some lines in the books that say nothing really grows there at all, unless you have money. Samwell does mention lemons growing there, but only in very specific locations, like the Gardens of the Rich. So it sounds like it would make more sense if that house with the red door were in, let's say, Dorne or Old Town, instead of Braavos. But I will leave this alone for now. I may discuss it further in some of her later chapters. Viserys and Dany's lives really start to go downhill once Sir Willem dies. This is one of the reasons why Dany misses these moments in her life, when things were much simpler and they were able to relax. The way Dany reminisces about the Red Door reminds me a lot of how Arya sees her sword and needle. It's a reminder of home, and this does give them solace. This is the only thing Dany wants. She wants back the childhood she had never known. She wants the big house that has the Red Door, but her brother, Viserys, wants everything back. He wants the Iron Throne, and the 7 Kingdoms, and the money and the gold, and all the respect his last name once demanded. Now I would say her brother Viserys is getting very desperate, and unfortunately for Daenerys, she has to suffer the most because of it. As soon as Sir Willem dies, his servants end up taking the rest of the little bit of money Viserys and Dany had. Then they threw them out onto the street, so now they're homeless and broke and still on the run. Their lives are a disaster. This is when they start bouncing around from location to location, never staying anywhere for very long. Her brother would not allow it, in fear of Robert Baratheon's assassins finding them and killing them. You see, the longer Robert Baratheon sat upon the Iron Throne, the less likely it seemed that the Targaryens would ever get it back. As the years went on, Viserys and Dany found it much harder to find supporters. More and more doors started to close in their faces. They had no choice but to sell what little valuable possessions they had left. The little bit of money they did have was now gone. Viserys was now known as the Beggar King. His name loses more and more respect as each day goes by. This is why I believe Viserys has become very desperate in his attempt to take back the Seven Kingdoms in the name of House Targaryen. You see, Daenerys had always assumed that she would wed Viserys when she came of age. I mean, this is the Targaryen way of life after all. For centuries, the Targaryens had married brother to sister, since Aegon the Conqueror had taken his sisters as wives. The bloodline must be kept pure. Viserys said this to Dany at least 1,000 times. Their blood was the king's blood, the golden blood of Valyria, the blood of the dragon. Targaryens do not mingle their blood with that of lesser men. But even after all that is said, Viserys is about to give his sister to the Dothraki, because he doesn't gain anything by getting married to Dany as of right now. He needs an army, and he needs one badly. How much longer will others wait for Viserys to become king, while him and Dany stay at their house, eat their food, and have to listen to Viserys cry like a little baby every single day? Daenerys is all that he has left. Without her, he has nothing to gain. Viserys cannot fight for what he wants on his own. He's not built like that. Daenerys is their only hope. And this is when we learn something very interesting about her. This is when we learn that it is never too hot for a Targaryen, or at least not for Dany. As she is getting ready for the night, her bath is filled with hot water that was brought up from the kitchen. The water was scalding hot, but it has no effect on Dany. She does not flinch or even cry out. She knew this would happen because Viserys would always tell her, "Ours is the house of the dragon. The fire is in our blood." This is the foreshadowing for when Daenerys hatches her dragon eggs. After her bath, they get her all dolled up, ready to be presented to Khal Drogo. But, of course, Viserys is never satisfied with how Dany looks. Therefore, he has to remind her. As soon as he sees her all dressed up, he says, "She looks too skinny." Illyria's like, "Come on, man, look at her. Look at that silver gold hair, those violet eyes. She is the blood of old Valyria, and highborn, daughter of the old king, and sister to the new king. There is no way Khal Drogo will not like her." But Viserys is like I suppose, although he sounds like he doubts this will work. Once again, he will not give Daenerys his approval. She is the one making the sacrifices for what he wants. As I said before, she does not want the Iron Throne. You know, Viserys actually reminds me of Joffrey. In this chapter, Viserys says he will kill Robert Baratheon himself, but we all know he has never swung his sword at a man. Joffrey said he would kill Stannis Baratheon and Robb Stark, but we all know he has never swung his sword at a man either. Guess who they both did end up hurting? Who did they direct their anger and frustrations at? Sansa and Dany. Instead of actually fighting on the field of battle for themselves, they would physically and verbally abuse 13-year-old little girls. Sansa and Dany would both go on to achieve what Joffrey and Viserys could never do on their own. Anyways, as Viserys and Illyria are having a conversation, Daenerys, once again, thinks about how she does not trust anything Illyria says, but Viserys is eating it up because Illyria is selling him his dream. He says everything he knows Viserys wants to hear. He tells Viserys how everyone across the sea is crying out for their king. He says, "They are your people, and they love you well. Men are toasting to your health, while women are sewing dragon banners and hide them against the day of your return from across the water." Daenerys doesn't believe him, while Viserys is sitting there nodding his head in agreement. Alright, now let's get to the final scene of the chapter when Daenerys meets Khal Drogo. Inside the manse, the air was heavy with the scent of spices, sweet lemon and cinnamon. They were escorted across the entry hall, where a mosaic of colored glass depicted the doom of Valyria. Oil burned in black iron lanterns all along the walls. One of the eunuchs sang of their arrival. Viserys of House Targaryen, the third of his name, he called in a high, sweet voice, King of the Andals and the Rhoynar and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and the Protector of the Realm. His sister, Daenerys Stormborn, Princess of Dragonstone. His honorable host, Illyrio Mopotis, Magister of the Free Cities of Pentos. The room was filled with the Dothraki horse lords and sellswords and followers of R'hllor, and the lords from the Summer Isles with skin as black as ebony. Daenerys looked at them all in wonder, and soon realized she was the only woman there. She was afraid. Illyrio then whispered to Daenerys and her brother, "Those three are Drogo's blood riders over there. The man that has the green beard is the brother to the Archon of Tyrosh, and the man behind him is Ser Jorah Mormont." Now that last name got Dany's attention. Dany found herself looking at Ser Jorah Mormont. He was an older man, over the age of 40, but he was still in good shape for his age. Dany notices the black bear of House Mormont embroidered on his chest. It's not often Dany sees someone from Westeros. Now, although she has no memory of ever living there, I think she does initially find some comfort in knowing Ser Jorah Mormont is from her homeland. Maybe this is a step in the right direction, but this feeling soon evaporates when she sets her eyes upon Khal Drogo. She is frightened by the sight of him. Dany wanted to run and hide, but she knew this would anger her brother. She knew this would wake the dragon. Viserys has her so beaten down mentally, physically, and emotionally, she does as he says, although she is very afraid. Dany notices that Khal Drogo was a head taller than the tallest man in the room, yet somehow he was light on his feet, almost graceful. He was younger than she thought he would be, no more than 30, but still twice her age. His skin was the color of copper, and his thick mustachios was bound with gold and bronze rings. This is when Viserys grabs Dany by the arm and squeezes her until it hurts. "Do you see his braid, sweet sister?" Drogo's braid was black as midnight and heavy with scented oil, and there were tiny bells in it that rang softly as he moved. They swung well below his belt, the end of it brushing against the back of his thighs. "You see how long it is?" Viserys said. "When Dothraki are defeated in combat, they cut off their braids in disgrace, so the world will know their shame. Khal Drogo has never lost a fight. He is Aegon the Dragon Lord come again, and you will be his queen." Dany was afraid of her brother, but not as afraid as she was of Khal Drogo. Dany does not want to marry him. She wants to go home. When Viserys hears this, he flies off the handle, just like he did in the show. In fact, what he says to Dany is almost identical to what he said in the show. "How are we to go home, sweet sister? They took our home from us." He drew her into the shadows out of sight, his fingers digging into her skin. "How are we to go home?" he repeated, meaning King's Landing and Dragonstone, and all the realm they had lost. Dany had only meant their rooms in Illyrio's estate, but there was no home for him there. Not even the big house that had the red door. That was never home for Viserys either. His fingers dug hard into her arm, demanding an answer. Viserys says, "Now dry your eyes. Illyrio is bringing him over now, and I will not have him see you crying like this." "Smile," Viserys whispered nervously, as his hand fell to the hilt of his sword, "and stand up straight. Let him see that you have breasts. Gods know, you have little enough as is." The chapter ends as it says, Daenerys smiles and stood up straight. So as you can see, Viserys beats her down once again. He physically hurts her, then he knocks her down verbally, keeping her in check. This sort of sums up the whole chapter. The relationship between Daenerys and her brother is extremely toxic, and it only gets worse as Viserys realizes his dream may never become a reality. As his desperation intensifies, his decision-making becomes more and more irrational. This will be his downfall. Daenerys, on the other hand, will go on to become one of the main characters in the entire series. Like I said earlier, since we are focusing on House Targaryen in this video, this is a good time for me to announce I will start making videos on the Fire and Blood book as well. At least once a week, I will try to release a chapter video on A Song of Ice and Fire, as well as a chapter video for Fire and Blood. This will help us all get ready for the release of HBO's new series, House of the Dragon. Don't forget to enter the giveaway for your chance to win a copy of Fire and Blood. That link is down below. I want to thank everyone for watching this video, and I want to thank all of you who support my channel on Patreon. Thank you all so much. I will see you again very soon. Have a great day. Bye.